Next question, is running on a treadmill often beneficial? Yes, absolutely. Not more beneficial necessarily than running outside, but also not less beneficial. It really just depends on the context and the scenario. If you are training for running that's going to take place outside and you're not a very, very advanced runner that's spent years and years and years running outside, and you have found that running on a treadmill doesn't decrease from your performance, then you absolutely can run on a treadmill or you can run outside. It's really up to you. If you prefer the treadmill, go for it. If you are less of a high level runner, less experienced runner, and you're training for something that's going to occur outside, whether it's a 2-mile run, 5-mile run, or selection or something like that, or a race, you definitely want to get a good chunk of your running in outside, ideally on similar surfaces and in similar terrain, rolling hills, whatever it may be. However, there are absolutely cases where running on a treadmill makes sense. If you're doing a speed session, for example, if you're doing repeats or a threshold run and it's crazy, crazy hot outside, or it's crazy, crazy cold outside, or there's snow and ice on the ground, or it's a thunderstorm or something like that. Nothing wrong whatsoever with running on a treadmill. Absolutely no problem. Actually, I would recommend that. You're going to get better speed adaptations if you do it in a climate controlled environment, or if it's the winter time and there's ice and snow, you're not going to get a great tempo run in, and it's potentially going to be dangerous to do it outside. A lot of people are kind of purists about, oh, you better do all of your training outside. Treadmills are cheating or something like that, which is not true at all. That's just a very closed-minded approach. That's kind of like the running version of the people who think like using straps for lifting and belts for lifting is not okay ever in any context, which is completely just indicates that you have no idea what you're talking about. Or if you live in an area that's very, very hilly and you want to do tempo work or threshold work or speed work or something like that. I'm not talking like little rolling hills. I'm talking like very, very hilly. Like sometimes you might be going up a 30% incline. 30 is pretty steep. Sometimes you might be going up a 15% incline, 16% incline. Other times you might be going down that 16% incline. When you're doing tempo work, threshold work, that's going to significantly affect the adaptations that you might get from that run. Now, if you're training for a run that you know is going to take place in similar terrain, that's one thing. But if you're training for a run that's going to take place on reasonable terrain, maybe some rolling hills, mostly flat, even a little bit of potential slightly steep hills, but not really, then you want to probably not do most of that training outside on the really, really hilly terrain. Because going uphill is going to slow you down and it's going to reduce your potential adaptations to that tempo pace, because you're just going to have to slow down or else you're going to go way, way too hard for a tempo run. And then going downhill is also, it's going to make you faster for sure, but it's also going to be a little bit rough on the joints. Running fast downhill, of course, when you have to do it is great. If you're training for something that's going to take place, running fast downhill, you want to get used to it. But if you're not, it's just going to add stress to your joints, and it's not necessarily what I would recommend doing all the time. So in that case, I would use a treadmill, put it on 1%, maybe rotate back and forth between 0%, 1%, 3%, something like that, and stick to your tempo pace. Or if you don't have access to a track, if you have no access to a track and you don't have any access to like flat ground anywhere and you want to do speed work, boom, treadmill would be perfect. Or if you live in a very, very flat area and you're training for something that's going to take place on hills, then you could do the opposite. You could do your tempo work with a little bit of hills on the treadmill, with the incline on the treadmill. You can also do hill sprints, hill repeats on a treadmill. Doing hill repeats on a treadmill can, in some cases, be even more optimal than doing it outside. It depends on what you have access to. But if you don't have any great hills around, or if you want to really be in control of your rest periods, where you just hop off the treadmill, hop back on, instead of finishing the hill and having to walk all the way back down to the bottom, then treadmills can be great. So lots and lots of potential benefits to running on the treadmill. But also just remember that if you're only doing treadmill running, it's going to be a little bit different when you get outside and do outdoor running, especially if you are training for something that's going to take place outdoors. So if you live in an area that is conducive to all outdoor running, I think it's way more mentally stimulating and more enjoyable to run outside, then absolutely do it. But if any of the things I just mentioned apply to you, or sometimes apply to you, depending on the season or whatever, or where you're at throughout the year, then thinking that the treadmill is going to be some sort of bad option that you need to avoid is a mistake. You absolutely can do more stuff on treadmills.